My son told me to sell my wedding ring for rent money, so I sold something else instead. The words still echo in my mind from that terrible dinner. I sat across from Eric and his wife Samantha, fork trembling in my 72-year-old hand, trying to enjoy the pot roast I'd made for them. When I gently asked about their rent situation, I'd been helping for months, Eric's face twisted into something ugly. "Dad, you're old. You've got that ring from Mom sitting on your finger doing nothing. Sell it and stop being such a burden." The room went silent. Samantha didn't defend me. She nodded, actually nodded, like this made perfect sense. My wedding ring. The gold band Margaret slipped on my finger 48 years ago, worn smooth by decades of love and loss. The only piece of her I had left after cancer took her 3 years ago. I looked down at the ring, then back at my son's entitled face. Something inside me, something that had bent and compromised and forgiven for too long, finally snapped. I slowly twisted the ring off my finger, the metal catching slightly on my knuckle. Eric's eyes lit up with greedy satisfaction. "You'll regret those words," I said quietly, placing the ring in my palm. His smirk told me he didn't believe me. He should have. That night, I sat alone in the house that suddenly felt too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. The ring rested in my palm, catching the lamplight the same way it had caught the sun on our wedding day. Margaret had cried when I'd slipped it on her finger, happy tears, the kind that make promises. I remembered dancing with her in this very living room, to Sinatra on the old record player. I remembered her laugh, the way she'd squeeze my hand 3 times to say, "I love you," without words. I remembered the hospital room, her frail fingers still finding mine, the ring cold against my skin as I held her one last time. "What would you want me to do, Maggie?" I whispered to the empty room. The answer came not in words, but in the fury building in my chest. Margaret had raised Eric with love and discipline, teaching him kindness and integrity. She would be heartbroken to see what he'd become, cruel, entitled, willing to discard his own father like trash. I stood and walked to the bedroom, opening the small wooden box on my dresser. Inside, beside the ring I just placed there, was Margaret's wedding band. I touched them both, feeling the weight of our vows. "You want me to sell something?" I muttered, jaw clenched. "Fine. But it won't be what you expect." The plan was already forming. Sleep didn't come easily, but clarity did. By dawn, I knew exactly what needed to happen. After my morning coffee, I knelt beside my bed and pulled out the small safe I kept hidden underneath, the one Eric didn't know existed. The one Margaret and I had filled together over the years. Inside were investment bonds, stock certificates, and documents for assets we'd quietly accumulated. Margaret had been brilliant with money, teaching me to save, to invest, to plan. "You never know when you'll need leverage," she'd always said, tapping her temple with that knowing smile. I spread the papers across my bed, calculating mentally. The family business shares I'd signed over to Eric 10 years ago, those could be sold. The joint accounts, the co-signed mortgage, the investments with his name attached, all of it could be undone with the right legal maneuvering. My hands shook slightly as I reached for my phone. Not from age or fear, but from the cold determination flooding through me. I dialed my lawyer, James Chen, a man I'd known for 30 years. He answered on the second ring. "James, it's Henry Morrison. I need to see you today. I want to make some changes to my estate and business holdings." "Of course, Henry. Everything all right?" I glanced at the wedding ring sitting in their box, then at the papers spread before me. "It will be," I said quietly. "But I need to do this discreetly. Very discreetly." The next morning, I played my part perfectly. Eric called around 10, his voice dripping with false concern. "Hey Dad, have you thought about what we discussed? About the ring?" I let my voice waver, injecting just enough defeat. "Yes, son. I think you're right. I'll look for a jeweler today. Get it appraised." The satisfaction in his voice made my stomach turn. That's great, Dad. Really great. This will help everyone, you know. Fresh start. Fresh start, I echoed hollowly. Yes. After hanging up, I drove straight to the bank. Not to a jeweler, to the safety deposit box I'd rented that morning. I placed the wooden box with both rings inside, sealing them away where Eric's greedy hands could never reach them. Then I drove to James's office. He'd prepared the preliminary paperwork overnight. Share transfer agreements. Mortgage modifications. Account separations. Every document designed to quietly extract myself from the financial web Eric had tangled me in. This is comprehensive, Henry, James said carefully. Once you sign these, Eric will own his obligations entirely. No safety net. That's exactly what I want. When I returned home, I found Eric and Samantha waiting on my porch. Did you get it appraised? Eric asked eagerly. I smiled sadly. Tomorrow. These things take time. He nodded, already mentally spending money that would never come. The deception had begun. James called me 3 days later with news that made my heart race. Henry, I found a buyer for your business shares. They're offering significantly above market value. But there's something you should know, the buyer specifically requested discretion. Who is it? I asked, though part of me already suspected. David Thornton. Eric's former business partner. I felt a slow smile spread across my face. David and Eric had parted ways badly 2 years ago, with Eric pushing David out through aggressive tactics and legal maneuvering. David had sworn he'd get his revenge, and apparently, I just handed him the perfect opportunity. What's his offer? I asked. The number James quoted made me grip the phone tighter. It was enough to secure my future completely, enough to ensure I'd never need Eric's help again, and enough to give David controlling interest in what had been our family business. There's a clause, James continued. David wants the sale structured so he gains immediate board control. Within 30 days, Eric could be voted out of his own company. I thought of Eric's sneer, his cruel words about the ring, Samantha's complicit silence. I thought of Margaret and what she'd think of the man our son had become. Draw up the papers, I said firmly. Let's proceed. That afternoon, I signed away my half of Morrison and Associates. The money hit my account within hours, a massive sum that Eric knew nothing about. I whispered to Margaret's photo on my nightstand, "You wanted me broke. Let's see how you handle rich." David Thornton arrived at my house the following evening, a bottle of whiskey in hand. He was younger than me by 20 years, sharp-eyed and calculating, everything Eric pretended to be but wasn't. We sat in my living room, the place where I'd once bounced Eric on my knee, teaching him to be a good man. Where had I gone wrong? Henry, David said, pouring us both drinks, I want you to understand what this means. With your shares combined with mine, I own 51% of Morrison and Associates. The board meets in 3 weeks. And Eric? I asked, already knowing the answer. Eric won't just lose his position. He'll lose his reputation. I have documentation of every corner he cut, every client he misled, every employee he mistreated. He's been riding on your good name for years. David's jaw tightened. When he forced me out, he told me I was too soft, too ethical. Said business was for ruthless men. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of what I'd set in motion. He told me to sell my wedding ring. The ring his mother gave me. David's eyes widened, then hardened with understanding. Then he deserves everything coming to him. We clinked glasses, sealing the unspoken alliance. By next month, David continued, your son won't even have an office. His keycard will be deactivated, his accounts frozen, his projects reassigned. Everything he built on your foundation will crumble. Good, I said, surprised by the venom in my own voice. The trap was set. To truly twist the knife, I needed Eric to feel secure, to believe he'd won. So the next day, I did something that would have seemed generous to anyone who didn't know the whole story. I wrote Eric and Samantha a check for $15,000, labeled 3 months' rent, to help you get ahead. Eric's eyes went wide when I handed it to him at Sunday dinner. "Dad, this is, wow. Thank you. I knew you'd come through." Samantha actually hugged me, her perfume suffocating. "You're the best, Henry. We'll pay you back, of course." They wouldn't. They never did. What they didn't know was that the check came from an account James had helped me set up specifically for this purpose, an account that would be flagged and frozen the moment they tried to cash it, triggering an investigation into their financial practices. The routing number was legitimate enough to pass initial inspection, but it was tied to a closed estate account, creating a legal nightmare. "Don't spend it all in one place," I said with a grandfather's smile. That very afternoon, I watched from my window as Eric drove off in his expensive car, probably already planning how to waste my supposed generosity. He stopped at his friend Marcus's house, and I imagined him bragging. Later, Marcus's wife told me what Eric had said, milked the old man again. "He's so easy to manipulate. Probably going senile." I smiled grimly. Let him think that. The check would bounce in exactly 4 days. The chaos would begin in 5. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. I'd been waiting for it, sitting with my coffee and crossword puzzle, when my phone rang. It was Eric, his voice rising with each word. "Dad. Dad, what the hell did you do? I just got a notice from the mortgage company." I feigned confusion perfectly. "Notice? What notice, son?" "They're saying your name was removed as a co-signer. The entire mortgage is now in my and Samantha's names only. We're responsible for the full payment, the payment we could barely afford when it was split." I let the silence hang for a moment, taking a slow sip of coffee. "Oh, that. Yes, my lawyer advised me to separate my assets. Estate planning, you know. At my age, these things are important." "Estate planning? You're destroying us. The payment is due in 2 weeks, and we don't have." His panic was music to my ears. The house they'd been living in, the house they'd assumed would one day be theirs, was now an anchor around their necks. A mortgage they couldn't afford, in their names only, with no safety net. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said calmly. "After all, you're a successful businessman. You told me so yourself." I heard Samantha screaming in the background, "Your father just dumped us with his debt. He's sabotaging us." Eric's voice dropped to something dangerous. "This isn't over, Dad." "No," I agreed softly. "It certainly isn't." I hung up and smiled. The dominoes were falling beautifully. Eric showed up at my door that evening, Samantha in tow, both of them wearing expressions of forced contrition. I'd expected this, the moment when they'd realize they needed me and try to manipulate me back into compliance. "Dad," Eric began, voice oozing false warmth, "we may have overreacted earlier. We understand you're just trying to protect yourself." "That's smart." Samantha nodded eagerly. "We don't want there to be tension between us. Your family, Henry. The most important thing." I invited them in, playing the lonely old man perfectly. "I don't want to fight either. Your mother would hate to see us like this." The mention of Margaret made Eric flinch slightly. Good, let him feel guilty. I offered them tea, and we sat in the living room where I'd delivered my ultimatum days before. "Maybe we can work something out," Eric said carefully. "If you could help us with the mortgage for just a few months, until we stabilize." I pretended to consider it, letting hope bloom in their eyes. "I'll think about it. But I need to know you respect me, Eric. Not just my money." "Of course, Dad. Of course we do." They stayed for an hour, laughing at my stories, complimenting my cooking. When they left, Samantha hugged me again. But I'd seen them exchange a look in the hallway. And as they walked to their car, my hearing aid, turned up just slightly, caught Samantha's whisper, "He'll be gone soon anyway. Old bastard can't last much longer." Eric's quiet laugh in response told me everything. I closed the door, rage burning cold in my chest. The next morning, I made a trip to an electronics store across town, somewhere Eric and Samantha would never shop. The young clerk, maybe 19, looked at me skeptically when I asked about recording devices. Looking for something to record family dinners, I explained with a grandfather's smile. My memory isn't what it used to be. I want to remember the conversations. He sold me a small, voice-activated recorder, no bigger than a USB drive. Battery lasts 2 weeks, he said. Crystal clear audio quality. That Sunday, I invited Eric and Samantha for dinner again. While they were hanging their coats, I excused myself to check on the roast and attached the device under the dining table with a small piece of mounting tape. Hidden in shadow, invisible unless you knew to look. Dinner started pleasantly enough. But after their second glass of wine, when they thought I was hard of hearing and focused on my meal, the real conversation began. "How much longer do you think we have to do this?" Samantha muttered to Eric. "Not long. He's 72. Could be any day now, honestly. What about the will? I'm the only child. It all comes to us. House, accounts, everything." Samantha's voice dropped to a vicious whisper, "He's such a useless old man. Taking up space, draining resources. We should start looking at retirement homes. Cheap ones." Eric laughed, actually laughed. "The cheapest. Why waste money on someone who's practically dead already?" I kept eating, face neutral, but inside I was recording every word in my mind too. Later that night, I retrieved the device. Listening back, I smiled coldly. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. David Thornton's voice was electric with controlled excitement. "Henry, it's done. The takeover papers are ready. The board meeting is scheduled for next Monday. I have the votes, your shares plus my coalition. Eric won't see it coming." I stood in my kitchen, looking out at the garden Margaret and I had planted together. "Will it be clean?" "Cleaner than he deserves," David replied. "But yes, legally airtight. He'll be removed as CEO, his contracts voided, his access revoked. I'm bringing in an independent auditor to review his dealings. If there's anything criminal, and I suspect there is, we'll find it." "He's still my son," I said quietly, surprising myself. "He stopped being your son when he told you to sell your wedding ring," David said, not unkindly. "This is about justice, Henry. For you, for your late wife's memory, for every person Eric has wronged in business." I thought of the recording, of Samantha's venom, of Eric's casual cruelty. "You're right. Proceed. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I'll call you after." "David? Thank you. Thank yourself. You're the one who had the courage to act." After hanging up, I walked to Margaret's photo. "Time for the fun to begin, Maggie," I whispered, touching the frame gently. Outside, Eric's car pulled into my driveway. He was coming to butter me up again, to extract more money, more promises. He had no idea his entire world would collapse in 5 days. I opened the door, smile in place. Monday morning arrived like Judgment Day. I woke at 5 a.m., too excited to sleep. Somewhere across town, Eric was probably still snoring, dreaming of his empire, unaware that the walls were already crumbling. At 8:47 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Morrison. This is Kevin from Morrison and Associates Security. Your son just tried to enter the building. His keycard isn't working. He's asking, actually, he's demanding to speak with you." I smiled into the phone. "Tell him it's not my company anymore." "Sir. The new owner should be arriving any moment." Direct all questions to David Thornton. I could hear Eric's voice in the background, rising in volume and panic. The security guard muted for a moment, then returned. Mr. Thornton just arrived. He's speaking with your son now. Thank you, Kevin. That will be all. I hung up and waited. It took 17 minutes. When Eric finally called, he was screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What did you do? David owns the company. My company? Your company? I asked calmly. It was never yours, Eric. It was mine. Margaret's and mine. We built it. You inherited a position you never earned. You sold your shares to my enemy. You betrayed me. No, son. You betrayed me when you told me to sell your mother's ring. That ring? This is about that stupid ring. My voice went cold. I sold something else instead. Just like I promised. I hung up while he was still shouting. The revenge was beginning to taste sweet. The financial chaos spread like wildfire. By Wednesday, Eric and Samantha's credit cards started declining, first at the gas station, then at the grocery store. The bounced check I'd given them had triggered fraud alerts across their accounts, freezing their credit while banks investigated. Samantha called me, crying. Henry, please, something's wrong with our accounts. We can't access our money. Have you contacted your bank? I asked innocently. They say there's an investigation. Something about a fraudulent check. But the only check we deposited was yours. That is strange. I'm sure it will sort itself out. It wouldn't. By Friday, their landlord, who I'd quietly contacted, explaining Eric's plan to default on rent, delivered an eviction notice. Eric and Samantha had 30 days to vacate or face legal action. The public humiliation reached its peak on Saturday night. Eric had reserved a table at the Merchant, the most expensive restaurant in town, probably trying to maintain appearances. I knew this because his friend Marcus had mentioned it. I happened to be having dinner there too, in a quiet corner with James Chen, discussing the next phase of our plan. We watched as Eric and Samantha were brought their check. Eric handed over his credit card with a confident flourish. The server returned moments later, face apologetic. Sir, this card was declined. Eric's face went crimson. That's impossible. Try this one. Declined. Another card. Declined. Samantha fumbled through her purse, her cards meeting the same fate. The entire restaurant watched as they were escorted out, promising to return with cash, their humiliation complete. Samantha's voice carried across the parking lot, "This is all your father's fault. He's sabotaging us." Eric's response, "Then he'll pay for it." But I'd only just begun. Sunday morning, I executed the next phase. I'd spent the previous evening making copies, multiple copies, of the audio recording from the dinner. The one where they called me useless, discussed my imminent death like a business opportunity, and planned to dump me in the cheapest nursing home they could find. Using a burner email account James's assistant had helped me set up, I sent the audio file to 12 carefully selected recipients. David Thornton, Eric's new boss. The mortgage company holding their loan, their landlord, Eric's former business partners, our extended family group chat administrator, the HR director at Morrison & Associates, 3 of Eric's largest former clients, and 2 local community leaders who knew our family well. The subject line read simply, "The real Eric Morrison." The email body contained minimal text, recorded at family dinner, September 28, decide for yourself what kind of man he is. By noon, my phone was exploding. My sister Patricia called first, her voice shaking with anger. "Henry, is this real? Did Eric really say these things?" "Every word. I'm calling him right now. This is unforgivable." The family group chat erupted into chaos. Cousins, nieces, nephews, everyone who'd watched Eric grow up, who'd celebrated his successes, were hearing his true nature. The messages came in waves. Disgusting. How could he? Poor Henry. After everything you did for him. By evening, Eric's phone was probably melting from the volume of angry calls. His reputation, so carefully cultivated, was disintegrating in real time. And somewhere in that chaos, justice was being served, one revelation at a time. Margaret would have approved. Monday morning, I sat in James Chen's office, staring at the revised will he'd prepared. The document that would ensure Eric never profited from his cruelty. "Are you certain about this, Henry?" James asked gently. "This is final." I thought of Eric's sneer, Samantha's venom, the casual way they discussed my death. Absolutely certain. The new will was elegant in its simplicity. My house, the home where Margaret and I had built our life, would go to Harmony House, a local charity supporting domestic violence survivors. My investments, worth significantly more than Eric realized, would be split between 3 organizations: Margaret's favorite cancer research foundation, a scholarship fund for underprivileged students, and a trust for my granddaughter Emily, Eric's daughter from his first marriage. Emily. 20 years old, working 2 jobs to pay for community college because Eric had cut her off when she'd refused to lie for him during his divorce. She'd been the only family member to visit me regularly, the only one who saw me as a person rather than an ATM. "Everything goes to charity and Emily," I confirmed. "Eric and Samantha get nothing." James printed the documents, and I signed with a steady hand. 2 witnesses, James's paralegal and the office notary, added their signatures. Within hours, a sealed letter was sent to Eric's address via certified mail, requiring his signature. The letter from Morrison and Associates' legal department informed him of the will change, as legally required for potential heirs. The call came that evening. "You changed your will?" Eric screamed. "You're leaving everything to charity?" "After everything I've..." "After everything you've what, Eric?" "Called me useless. Planned to warehouse me. Told me to sell my soul." The line went silent except for his ragged breathing. "You made your choice," I said quietly. "Now live with it." The next evening, around 8 p.m., Eric did something I'd been half expecting but hoping he'd be smart enough to avoid. He showed up at my house drunk, pounding on my door, shouting obscenities. I didn't open it. Instead, I called 911 from my cell phone while watching through the window. 911, what's your emergency? My son is trying to break into my house. He's intoxicated and threatening me. Eric kicked the door. Once, twice. The frame shuddered but held. He moved to the living room window, and I heard glass shatter, Margaret's decorative window, the one with the stained glass cardinal she'd loved. He climbed through, bleeding from his hand, eyes wild. "Where are you, old man? You think you can destroy my life? You think you can steal my inheritance?" I stayed quiet in the bedroom, phone still connected to dispatch. My voice recorder, sitting on the dresser, captured every word. Eric trashed the living room, overturned furniture, smashed photos, tore the cushions off Margaret's favorite chair. The responding officers arrived within 6 minutes, finding him standing amid the destruction, still holding a broken picture frame. "Sir, step away from the property. Hands where we can see them." I emerged then, an old man in his pajamas, looking fragile and shaken. The officers took one look at the scene, the broken window, the destruction, my terrified expression, and made their decision. "Sir, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, destruction of property, and terroristic threats." As they cuffed him, Eric met my eyes. "You planned this." I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. What happened next, I swear, wasn't entirely my doing. My niece Sarah, Patricia's daughter, was part of the extended family chat where the audio recording had been shared. Sarah was 26, worked in social media marketing, and had never forgiven Eric for mocking her weight at a family reunion years ago. The audio clip, accidentally, found its way onto a local community Facebook group. Then Twitter. Then it went viral. Entitled CEO Caught Plotting to Dump Father in Nursing Home, read one headline. The local news picked it up. Morrison and Associates heir arrested after violent confrontation with elderly father. David Thornton, showing a flair for PR, released a statement on behalf of Morrison and Associates. We do not condone the behavior displayed by former employee Eric Morrison. This company was built on integrity and family values, principles Mr. Morrison clearly abandoned. Former. The word was intentional and devastating. Within 48 hours, Eric's face was everywhere, not as the successful businessman he pretended to be, but as the villain in a viral story about elder abuse and greed. Comment sections exploded with outrage. This is why people don't trust the wealthy. Imagine treating your own father like this. Hope he rots in jail. The father should write him out of the will. If only they knew I already had. Samantha's social media accounts went dark. She'd posted a photo the week before, bragging about their lavish lifestyle. Now, people were screenshot sharing it with commentary like, funded by elder exploitation. On Wednesday, I received a call from a producer at a regional news station. Mr. Morrison, we'd like to interview you. No, thank you, I said politely. This is a private family matter. But it wasn't private anymore. It was justice, displayed for the world to see. The legal proceedings moved faster than I'd anticipated. Eric was released on bail after 48 hours, his lawyer arguing it was a family dispute, blown out of proportion. But the damage was done, not just to his reputation, but to his marriage. Samantha had been noticeably absent during Eric's arrest and bail hearing. When Eric returned to their apartment, he found it half empty. Clothes gone from the closet. Jewelry missing from the dresser. And a note on the kitchen counter, short and brutal. I didn't sign up for this. You said you were wealthy. You said your father would take care of us. You lied. Don't contact me. My lawyer will be in touch. Eric called me that night, his voice hollow. She left. Samantha left. I felt no satisfaction, only a grim acknowledgement. What did you expect? We've been together 5 years. She was with you for your money, Eric. Money you thought you'd inherit from me. Money that came from your mother and me, not from anything you built yourself. I paused. Now she knows the truth. You have nothing. I have the business. No, David Thornton has the business. You have legal bills, debt, and the consequences of your choices. Dad, please. I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. You're not sorry, I interrupted. You're just facing consequences for the first time in your life. There's a difference. What do you want me to say? Nothing. There's nothing left to say. Within a week, Samantha filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Her lawyer moved aggressively, trying to claim half of assets that no longer existed. Eric's lawyer countered with evidence of her recorded statements, her complicity in the schemes against me. The divorce would be ugly in public. Eric's life had become a cautionary tale. And I was still not finished. 3 weeks after the arrest, Eric showed up at my door sober, gaunt, and broken. He'd lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. Dad, he said quietly. Can we talk? I considered sending him away. Margaret's voice whispered in my mind, he's still your son. But so was the memory of her ring, the cruelty, the betrayal. I let him in. We sat in the kitchen, not the dining room where I'd recorded his venom, but the informal space where Margaret used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. Neutral territory. I'm sorry, Eric began, and then his composure cracked. I'm so sorry, Dad. I don't know what I became. I don't know how I got so lost. Tears streamed down his face, real tears, not the manipulative kind he'd used before. When Mom died, I was angry. Angry at the world, at God, at you for still being here when she wasn't. And somewhere in that anger, I forgot who I was supposed to be. I listened, my own heart aching despite everything. The business, the money, Samantha, none of it made me happy. I kept chasing more, thinking it would fill the hole Mom left. But it just made the hole bigger. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I sold my integrity, my relationships, my soul. And for what? For nothing, I said quietly. For nothing, he agreed, voice breaking. Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything. But I need you to know, I'm truly, deeply sorry. I looked at my son, seeing both the man he'd become and the boy he'd been. You sold your respect long before I sold anything, I said softly. I stood and walked away, leaving him sobbing at the kitchen table. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Emily called me the next morning, her voice bright and confused. Grandpa? I just got a letter from a lawyer about a trust fund. Is this real? It's real, sweetheart. Come over this afternoon. I want to tell you a story. She arrived within the hour, sitting in Margaret's old chair, the one Eric had ruined, which I had restored. Emily looked so much like her grandmother, the same kind eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same core of decency. I told her everything. Not just about the recent events, but about Margaret and me, about building our life from nothing, about the values we tried to instill in Eric and where we'd failed. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the wooden box. Inside, both rings gleamed in the afternoon light. These rings represent a promise, Emily. A promise your grandmother and I made to each other, to love, to honor, to build something meaningful. I took out Margaret's ring, the delicate band she'd worn for 45 years. Your grandmother never let anyone put a price on love. Not on relationships, not on integrity, not on family. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She believed that real wealth isn't in bank accounts or businesses. It's in the people we love and the values we uphold. I placed the ring in Emily's palm, closing her fingers around it. Now it's yours to protect. Grandpa, I can't, this is too much. You're the only one who understood what really matters, I said firmly. You visited me when no one else did. You valued our relationship, not my money. You're who your grandmother hoped you'd become. Emily threw her arms around me, crying. I'll make you both proud. I promise. You already have, sweetheart. Outside, spring was blooming in Margaret's garden. The legacy was safe. The community response to my story, once the full truth emerged, was overwhelming. David Thornton, in a move that surprised even me, held a press conference announcing Morrison and Associates' return to founding principles. I want to publicly thank Henry Morrison for being the only honest man left in this business, David announced, cameras flashing. While others pursued profit over integrity, Henry reminded us what this company was built on: family values, ethical practices, and genuine care for people. The article ran in the business section: local patriarch stands up to corporate greed, in his own family. Reporters called, but I declined interviews. This wasn't about fame or vindication. It was about justice. What I didn't decline was the community recognition. The senior center where I volunteered asked me to speak at their monthly meeting. Standing before a room of my peers, people who'd faced similar disrespect from their own children, I shared not the revenge, but the lesson. Know your worth, I told them. Age doesn't diminish your value. Experience doesn't make you disposable. And family who treats you as less than human isn't family at all. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. But the sweetest moment came unexpectedly. I was having coffee at Milton's diner when the owner, Frank, slid into my booth. Henry, I heard what happened. Your son, the business, all of it. I braced myself for pity. Instead, Frank grinned. You're a legend, man. The old man who outsmarted his greedy son. Half my customers are talking about you. You reminded everyone that wisdom beats arrogance every time. That afternoon, I drove past the office building that housed Morrison and Associates. Eric's reserved parking spot now had David's name. The company directory by the entrance no longer listed Eric Morrison anywhere. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt at peace. Margaret would have been proud. The bankruptcy auction for Morrison and Associates subsidiary holdings was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late November. Eric had been forced to liquidate his personal shares, the ones he'd earned independently, to cover legal fees and debt. Everything he'd built outside of the main company was being sold off piece by piece. I sat in the back of the auction house, a cap pulled low, watching vultures circle Eric's failures. Equipment, client contracts, intellectual property. All of it going to the highest bidder. Then Lot 47 was announced, Morrison Consulting Division, including all active contracts, staff agreements, and trademark rights. This had been Eric's pet project, the one thing he'd created without my involvement. His proof that he was his own man. Now it was being sold to cover his debts. The bidding started at $50,000. David Thornton bid $75,000. A competitor bid $80,000. The price climbed quickly. This was valuable property, profitable contracts with major clients. At $150,000, I raised my paddle. The auctioneer's gavel paused. $150 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear $160? David caught my eye across the room and smiled, understanding immediately. He shook his head slightly. He was out. The competitor bid $160. I countered with $175. Back and forth we went until I placed the final bid, $225,000. Sold. To bidder $317. I approached the registration desk after, handing over the certified check I'd prepared. I need the paperwork transferred to this name. I slid across a document. The clerk read it and looked up in surprise. Emily Morrison. Is she here? She's my granddaughter. I'm purchasing on her behalf. The trust documentation is attached. Within an hour, Emily owned Morrison Consulting. At 20 years old, she was now CEO of a profitable division with 12 employees and contracts worth over $1 million annually. I called her from the parking lot. Emily, honey, how would you feel about running a business? Her shocked silence spoke volumes. 2 months later, on a cold January morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Eric standing on my porch, thin and haggard. He wasn't wearing a coat despite the freezing temperature, and his car, the expensive sedan he'd been so proud of, was gone. He'd arrived on foot. Dad, he said quietly, I have nowhere else to go. I'm being evicted tomorrow. I've been sleeping in my office, but they changed the locks. I just need a place to stay. Just for a few weeks until I can figure things out. I looked at my son, truly looked at him. 45 years old, broken by his own choices, standing on the porch where Margaret used to greet him with hugs and fresh-baked cookies. For a moment, I wavered. He was still my child, still the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to be a man. Then I remembered his words, you're old. You've got that ring from Mom. Sell it and stop being such a burden. I remembered Samantha's venom, useless old man. I remembered the recording, we should start looking at retirement homes. Cheap ones. I thought of Margaret's ring, safely with Emily now. I thought of the respect I'd reclaimed, the boundaries I'd established, the lesson that needed to be complete. Eric, I said gently but firmly, do you remember what you told me? You told me to sell my memories, to commoditize the most precious thing I had left of your mother. He looked at his feet. I know. I'm sorry. You wanted me to sacrifice my dignity so you could maintain your lifestyle, I continued. You sold your soul for comfort and status. You chose money over family, appearance over integrity. I know. His voice cracked. I know what I did. I've lost everything, my wife, my business, my reputation, my home. What more do you want from me? I want you to understand, I said quietly. You sold your soul. I'm not going to help you buy it back. I met his desperate eyes one final time. Goodbye, Eric. I closed the door. Spring arrived with dogwoods blooming and robins singing, Margaret's favorite season. Emily had asked me to attend the grand reopening of Morrison Consulting, now rebranded as Morrison Legacy Solutions. She'd spent 3 months rebuilding the company culture, bringing in new clients, and establishing herself as a leader. The event was held at the original Morrison and Associates building, in the conference room where my father had first drafted our business plan 60 years ago. David Thornton was there, having merged the consulting division back into the main company as a wholly owned subsidiary, with Emily retaining full operational control and equity. Local press attended. Business leaders. Former employees who'd left during Eric's tenure and were now returning. The room buzzed with energy and optimism. Emily stood at the podium in a professional blue suit, looking every inch the CEO she'd become. I want to thank everyone for being here today. This company represents more than profit, it represents values. The values my great-grandfather and grandfather built this business on. She gestured to me, sitting in the front row. My grandfather taught me that integrity isn't negotiable. That people matter more than numbers. That real success is measured not in what you accumulate, but in what you give and who you become. Cameras flashed as she spoke. A reporter raised her hand. Ms. Morrison, there's been significant media attention around your family's story. Your father's fall from grace, your grandfather's response. How does it feel to now lead a company that was once your father's? Emily paused, choosing her words carefully. My father made choices that had consequences. My grandfather taught me that we're all accountable for our choices. This company is about moving forward with integrity. Then she smiled. And Grandpa's wedding ring? It's not for sale. The room erupted in applause. Afterward, a young journalist approached me. Mr. Morrison, can I ask about the ring everyone keeps mentioning? I pulled out my wallet and showed him the photo I kept there, Margaret and me on our wedding day, both rings visible. It's not for sale, I said simply. Never. Never. 6 months after that day at the door, I received a letter. No return address, but I recognized Eric's handwriting immediately. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Dad, I'm in Ohio, working construction. It's honest work, and I'm learning what it means to earn respect instead of demand it. I'm in therapy. I'm sober. I'm trying to become someone Mom would recognize. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know, I finally understand. The ring was never just jewelry. It was love, commitment, memory. Everything I threw away. I'm sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the name Morrison again. Eric. I read the letter 3 times, then placed it in the wooden box with the rings. That afternoon, I drove to Emily's office. She'd just finished a board meeting and greeted me with a hug. Grandpa. What brings you by? Walk with me, I said. We strolled through the business district, past storefronts and cafes, until we reached the small park where Margaret and I used to have lunch decades ago. We sat on our old bench. I got a letter from your father, I said. Emily tensed. And? He's trying. Really trying. But that's his journey now, not mine. I took her hand. Emily, I want you to remember something. This whole experience, the betrayal, the revenge, the justice, it taught me that we become what we choose. Your father chose greed and lost everything. I chose dignity and found peace. You chose integrity and built something real. What are you saying, Grandpa? I'm saying never put a price on what truly matters. Money fades. Businesses rise and fall. But integrity lasts. Love lasts. The values we uphold define us more than any bank account or title ever will. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, and I felt Margaret's presence in the spring breeze. Your grandmother and I built something that transcended us, not the business, but the values. You're carrying that forward now. That's the real inheritance. We sat in comfortable silence as the afternoon sun painted the sky gold. Later, I walked to my car alone, head high, heart light. I'd protected what mattered, established boundaries, and ensured that the legacy Margaret and I built would continue through someone who truly understood its worth. As I drove home, I glanced at my hand on the steering wheel. My wedding ring caught the sunlight, gleaming with 48 years of promises kept. It had never been for sale. And neither was my dignity. Never put a price on what truly matters. Money fades. Integrity lasts. Choose who you become wisely, because in the end, that choice defines everything. 3 weeks after the arrest, Eric showed up at my door sober, gaunt, and broken. He'd lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Dad," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I considered sending him away. Margaret's voice whispered in my mind, "He's still your son." But so was the memory of her ring, the cruelty, the betrayal. I let him in. We sat in the kitchen, not the dining room where I'd recorded his venom, but the informal space where Margaret used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. Neutral territory. "I'm sorry," Eric began, and then his composure cracked. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I don't know what I became. I don't know how I got so lost." Tears streamed down his face, real tears, not the manipulative kind he'd used before. "When Mom died, I was angry. Angry at the world, at God, at you for still being here when she wasn't. And somewhere in that anger, I forgot who I was supposed to be. I listened, my own heart aching despite everything. The business, the money, Samantha, none of it made me happy. I kept chasing more, thinking it would fill the hole Mom left. But it just made the hole bigger." He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I sold my integrity, my relationships, my soul. And for what?" "For nothing," I said quietly. "For nothing," he agreed, voice breaking. "Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything. But I need you to know, I'm truly, deeply sorry." I looked at my son, seeing both the man he'd become and the boy he'd been. "You sold your respect long before I sold anything," I said softly. I stood and walked away, leaving him sobbing at the kitchen table. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Emily called me the next morning, her voice bright and confused. "Grandpa, I just got a letter from a lawyer about a trust fund. Is this real?" "It's real, sweetheart. Come over this afternoon. I want to tell you a story." She arrived within the hour, sitting in Margaret's old chair, the one Eric had ruined, which I'd had restored. Emily looked so much like her grandmother, the same kind eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same core of decency. I told her everything. Not just about the recent events, but about Margaret and me, about building our life from nothing, about the values we tried to instill in Eric and where we'd failed. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the wooden box. Inside, both rings gleamed in the afternoon light. "These rings represent a promise, Emily. A promise your grandmother and I made to each other, to love, to honor, to build something meaningful." I took out Margaret's ring, the delicate band she'd worn for 45 years. "Your grandmother never let anyone put a price on love. Not on relationships, not on integrity, not on family." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She believed that real wealth isn't in bank accounts or businesses. It's in the people we love and the values we uphold. I placed the ring in Emily's palm, closing her fingers around it. Now it's yours to protect. Grandpa, I can't, this is too much. You're the only one who understood what really matters, I said firmly. You visited me when no one else did. You valued our relationship, not my money. You're who your grandmother hoped you'd become. Emily threw her arms around me, crying. I'll make you both proud. I promise. You already have, sweetheart. Outside, spring was blooming in Margaret's garden. The legacy was safe. The community response to my story, once the full truth emerged, was overwhelming. David Thornton, in a move that surprised even me, held a press conference announcing Morrison and Associates' return to founding principles. I want to publicly thank Henry Morrison for being the only honest man left in this business, David announced, cameras flashing. While others pursued profit over integrity, Henry reminded us what this company was built on: family values, ethical practices, and genuine care for people. The article ran in the business section: Local patriarch stands up to corporate greed, in his own family. Reporters called, but I declined interviews. This wasn't about fame or vindication. It was about justice. What I didn't decline was the community recognition. The senior center where I volunteered asked me to speak at their monthly meeting. Standing before a room of my peers, people who'd faced similar disrespect from their own children, I shared not the revenge, but the lesson. Know your worth, I told them. Age doesn't diminish your value. Experience doesn't make you disposable. And family who treats you as less than human isn't family at all. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. But the sweetest moment came unexpectedly. I was having coffee at Milton's diner when the owner, Frank, slid into my booth. Henry, I heard what happened. Your son, the business, all of it. I braced myself for pity. Instead, Frank grinned. You're a legend, man. The old man who outsmarted his greedy son. Half my customers are talking about you. You reminded everyone that wisdom beats arrogance every time. That afternoon, I drove past the office building that housed Morrison and Associates. Eric's reserved parking spot now had David's name. The company directory by the entrance no longer listed Eric Morrison anywhere. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt at peace. Margaret would have been proud. The bankruptcy auction for Morrison and Associates subsidiary holdings was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late November. Eric had been forced to liquidate.